Hi, everyone. My name is Nisha Baxi, and I am a developer marketer, and I've been in the industry for roughly 15 years. I've worked at startup companies, Microsoft, Salesforce, Facebook, previously ran my own meetup, and I'm currently on the board of directors for the American Red Cross. I'm here with one of my very dear friends, Sophia Li, who is just a brilliant thinker, and not just that, a very successful startup CEO that is around marketing and focuses on bid optimization for Facebook and Instagram. Thank you, Sophia, for being here.
Thank you, Nisha.
Well, it's really funny that I say thank you for being here because actually this was your idea. Maybe you can kind of help set the stage a little bit about, how we started talking and why we're doing this today.
Yeah, so I called you yesterday out of just, catching up about how are you doing during this crazy, weird pandemic time. And through us talking, we both are marketers, and we basically both shared our frustrations around and concerns around what's happening right now in the current marketplace, where I think a lot of businesses are freaking out. And, I get VC email updates. I get all these, startup related newsletters. And I hear CEOs talk about this stuff, CMOs talk about this stuff all day long. Everybody's freaking out, and everybody says the first thing that gets cut is the marketing department. And to me, this is my career, and I take it very personally, despite the current, climate. But so I kind of want to talk about that because I think, aside from marketing department being cut, the reality is how do we help business to grow? I think it's important, especially during this time, to talk about figure out ways to help empower business owners and also marketers to be creative and think about the resource that I do have and how to generate revenue and get their names out there.
Yeah, and this is a really great time actually for marketers to get creative and to actually, come up with that, a new marketing plan that can actually, drive, some serious growth. So Tell me a little bit more about Clearmob and you and how you started it and, kind of your thesis for the industry.
Sure. Okay. So Clearmob, like you said, does bid optimization, and we're currently focusing on Facebook and Instagram as a platform, and we'll add Google, Twitter, all the other platforms later as soon as we can. And so essentially, when I think about the marketing function itself, we have all these fancy titles, CMOs, director of product marketing, etc. It's very confusing, but I can break it up into three pieces. One is the creative side. That's your ideas of whether it's a creative ad or your tagline or a strategy. That's just your assumption and your ideation in terms of how you create connection with your customers. And the second piece is execution, where someone has to pick up that phone, call that billboard company. Someone has to go walk your creatives to Facebook console or Google AdWords to upload those things. So execution is very important. And the third piece is after you set all of those ads up, in today's world, it's digital. So we have all this data. Data will be no good unless you can actually analyze it, and then ultimately is to optimize the performance. So we focus specifically on the data front, and the bidding part is actually the lowest common denominator in the sphere of digital marketing, because whenever you run an ad, you have to bid, you have to figure out your pricing and how does that affect your ROI, etc. So bid actually summarizes a placement of it actually ties into your revenue, your campaign volume, your performance all into one, and you can use that to gauge your performance. So it's actually something that you either use one of those auto bidding tools on Facebook, or you do it manually. And if you do it manually, it's impossible to do it efficiently without having some kind of automated system. So that's what we do.
And Clearmob is that solution. And, one thing I kind of want to hone in on a little bit that you just shared was, you're kind of that cycle of those three pieces of what marketing does, that ideas and creative being the first, and then execution being the second, and then, the third piece being, data and analysis. Can you kind of explain to me, how you came up with that framework and kind of what that means to you, and how as a marketer you can actually apply that framework to be successful?
Good question. So I guess I've done monetization, advertisement, and also my last company that I built designed a way to serve ads and design the algorithms behind it. So fundamentally, you have a marketer whose job is to essentially get the product out there, and then you grow the business. And I view it as a digital storefront. So once you run an ad on Facebook, that's your digital storefront based on whatever foot traffic you've got. And so when I think of the framework of creativity, execution, and data, the mode of that is 3 different categories of ways you can actually separate out your budget, separate out your functions, and separate out the different areas you can optimize. So for example, if one person does all 3, that person, first of all, having that amount of data that's constantly distracting you, and while you're coming up with like ideas on like the next tagline, this other particular picture to connect to customers, it's extremely distracting. Maybe there are other people that are super smart, but from my experience, I personally find it, I tend to like freeze up when I have all 3 things going at once. So from my experience, when I used to run ads, I would break these things up into 3 different pieces on a spreadsheet. I'm like, this is a tool I'm using to upload stuff, and these are my concepts and assumptions of the creatives, and this is the data to back it up. And then I refresh that. So when I started Clearmob, the intention is to how do we create something that that supports and maximizes the output of the marketing team without interrupting their creative flow.
Got it. So basically, like, this is a framework that you can use for basically separating like different functions within marketing, budget, and then basically giving marketers the opportunity to kind of like free up their space so that they can do what they're best at.
Exactly.
In each of those different categories.
Exactly. Because data, you spend 75% of the time to analyze, and, campaign data comes in real time, 24/7, literally. So even when you go to sleep, that campaign is still running. What you can do is run that report every so often, every day if you want, but there's a pattern to that data, and there are a lot of opportunities you can capitalize on if you actually able to have a structured way to measure that. And machine is perfect for it. So the goal is to not like take that away from people, but more like, okay, now if you have your trust in this data, like 2 is bigger than 1 kind of thing. Right. You can go back to have that level of comfort and thinking about how do you want to get connect to your customer.
Got it. No, I think that's a great way to think about it. And, one of the other things that you and I were chatting about yesterday, and this is sort of switching gears a little bit about, right now we're in a really strange time. Like, we're smack dab in the middle of, COVID-19. These are very, uncharted territories, unprecedented times. You alluded to marketers, being the first group kind of cut from their different, their various, various companies and startups right now. So what are some of the pain points that you're seeing now for marketers? And then I guess, what they're kind of up against, and then sort of what are some of the other possible, solutions or opportunities that you see for these marketers simultaneously?
Yeah. So first, I think a lot of companies freak out during this time, and they cut marketing budget, and therefore they trim down the jobs for marketers. Right. My take on this marketing thing, like I mentioned, I break them into 3 different categories. Creativity is definitely its own category, and I think that's the primary function of a marketer. Yeah. And so during this time, it's more important that marketers have the space to become more creative. And when I say creative, you don't need to like be magical. You don't need to have magic. You just need to relate your product, whatever feature you've got or whatever product you have in your inventory, and sell those things to your customers during this climate. What is this climate? People are staying at home. People want to eat healthy. We're working out to establish a routine. Maybe there's some meditation apps out there. You know, there are a lot of ways to connect with your audience with a different set of messaging. So I think more than ever, this is even more so. Like now, it's important for marketers to do what they do best, and data is only going to tell you so much.
Yeah, and actually, you know, I read a post from my friend Modesta Getty. I think you know her as well, and she's a co-founder at Branch Metrics, and you know, actually, we should have her on to kind of share her ideas. But you know, she had posted something that during this time of social distancing, and there's some data in Wuhan and also that we're seeing here, is that people are connecting to each other more through apps, through social. Even more, you know, we already know that mobile is a really big part of our lives. And, you know, if you just go on your phone and you check your settings, you see that people are you're using your phone, you know, instead of 4 or 5 hours a day that you might be using it, you're using it 10 hours a day now.
Absolutely.
And so what you're saying is that now is an opportunity to do marketing because people are on their phones more. People have more time and want to spend more time with each other, right? I mean, that's why you and I are doing call right now.
Yep. And like one thing I just want to say, I think like, you know, we're in the Bay Area. We are surrounded and drowning in startups. There are so many of them. And I think like one of the things that we hear all the time is like, oh, build something people want, or like you got to like figure out how to get to your customers. So if you were to cut your marketing team or I understand cutting the budget, be more efficient with your spend. But if you were to cut your marketing team, if you didn't have people knock on your doors, you know, before this pandemic, how do you expect people to find you now? And so, you know, I think it's really, really important to think of your marketing team as important as your product team, essentially. Mm-hmm. You go together.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this isn't the time to be shy, right? More people are shopping online, more people are doing things online. So as a marketer, there is an opportunity to market online more. Instead of being scared and being shy and trying to preserve with what you have, which totally makes sense. There also is this like unique opportunity, and I love that you're saying that. And just personally, one of the things that I had a conversation with someone earlier today, and they had said, hey, like what are some of the marketing, you know, tactics and strategies that you think me as a founder of a startup, what should I be doing right now? And I think the biggest thing that you can do for yourself is content marketing, right? This is a great time. Every CEO that I know, and I know you do too, Sophia, you have a list of all the different blog posts that you've been planning on writing. You're like, when I have time, when I can sit quietly in a room and I can write something thoughtful, I'll write it down. And I think this is a really great time. Just write it, put it on Medium, let Google crawl it, you know, tag it in all the right places and put it on LinkedIn and, you know, see what happens, right?
Absolutely. I think content is like super important right now because have you seen those memes where there's like a meme of like, I finished Netflix. You know, we need more content. That's like what's missing. And guess what where did content come from? Creativity. You know, we gotta think without the structure.
Tell me more about, you know, I think the past 5-10 minutes that we've been chatting, you know, you keep bringing up creativity as being, you know, really important and sort of like baseline for marketers. Tell me more about how you think about that. Like what, you know, your thoughts on how important creativity is for a marketing person, because nowadays you always hear about marketers needing to be data driven. What does that mean for like a creative marketer? Are they the same person? Are they different? Like maybe you can kind of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. It's really interesting as our companies built everything based on data, and it's like algorithms all day long, and I have to tell you, when I look at a client's campaign, which I do often, and I've worked with companies like TikTok, WordPress, etc. And number one thing I always go back to, even after looking at numbers, content is super important. We can optimize bids or optimize budget. You can get incremental success, like 30-40% lift here and there. Those are, by the way, super awesome numbers. But if you have a good creative that really lands with your audience, that's like 2x, 3x. That makes or breaks your business. So I can't stress enough how important content and like creativity around your campaigns important. One of the things that I get, that I feel inspired by is, looking at a marketer's day-to-day function and how little time that they spend on working with a designer to get a right campaign going. And when I talk to our clients, even though we focus on the data portion of it, I often go back to look at their campaigns. My friends' companies that I help with, like, the first thing I ask them is like, what's your strategy? Do you understand your audience? Who is your product for? And send me your creatives. Let me see. Let me just check. Let me see how does it feel? Do I like them? Do they make me happy? Do they look sterile? Like, what does it mean? So that's where I always go to. And data shows, good creatives makes a way bigger lift than your budget change. So I think I encourage a lot of, I just encourage marketers to think outside of the box a little bit, let yourselves be free, and think in terms of like how you want to relate to your audience, what kind of problem you want to solve with your product, versus just like the executions of that.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important. And, one of the things that we were talking about right before we got on was that I can't even remember the last time I sat in a marketing meeting that was just around brainstorming. Like gone are yesterday we were saying, gone are the days of Mad Men, right? Where you just sit in a room and you think of, you spitball things and you come up with really interesting ideas. And, right now it's just about, what is a marketing tactic that I can employ that I know that can be tracked by Google Analytics, that I can show that I did X amount of work.
Yep.
Hi, Cali. This is our creative data-driven marketer, Cali.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that there really is something that's important, fundamental to the marketing function, that finesse piece, that relationship piece with using that like left side of your brain to come up with something, really fascinating. So, I think that that's really great that as you're thinking about something as data-driven as bid optimization, that you're constantly challenging marketers to think about content creatively, and even their own design. So that's really great.
Yeah. Can I go into a little bit of details in terms of how do companies can actually make it concrete in terms of
I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
Because I understand, when a CEO hires their CMO or your first marketer, it's like, okay, we need to grow. I get it. But how do you do that? And one thing that I want to highlight is, which I tell all of my friends and clients, is you need to have, first of all, preparation time and a budget for experimentation. You can't have a marketer come in and be like, 2x my business or grow to this. Often I get questions asked like, what is the CPA right now? What's the cost per install for an app? Well, there are many factors that goes into that. First of all, what are you selling? What are your creatives like? Different creatives within the same product has different click-through rates. So what I want to encourage come to think of is, I like to use 80-20 rule. 80% is where your real budget is going to come in. 20% is for experimentation. So let's say if you're a small business, you're like, okay, I will do $5,000 to $10,000 a month. Well, okay, 20% of that for experimentation. Maybe 5% of that, like 5% goes into the initial launch of the campaign. So you can like lay out all of your thesis, all of your ideas. These are taglines. These are the creatives that what I want my product to look like, and then launch them live at the same time, and then see which one performs. And then the ones that perform, meaning one number is bigger than the other, you keep those and scrap the rest. But during that process of you coming up with a creative idea, you know what assumptions you're making of your audience. Record those, like write those things down, so that you know the next set of like campaigns you're going to create, you can follow along of your thought process and your imagination. Like, oh, this really like landed with this customer because I thought this particular, you know, a dog works well with this vacuum cleaner in the creative, something like that. So 80-20 rule, and have a testing budget, have a test period. And after you have a successful campaign going live, always have a little bit of budget and to experiment with. You're always going to find something, because that's your, you know, I think there's a term that my friend taught me, is called listening. So that 20% is for listening, where you get to figure out the temperature of your audience in real time. Meaning your campaign, whatever worked over the last like a few months, will get sterile. You need to come up with new content to engage with your customers. And during that time, your customers' lives are changing too. You know, just like right now, our lives change. So coming out with fresh content, have budget for experimentation, and give the freedom to your designer or the marketer to do their thing, and allow errors to like exist.
Got it. And like, don't be shackled by those numbers and dollar signs, but be empowered by them. And
exactly. That's your feedback loop. That literally only tells you what you've done. It does not tell you what you will do. So I think from my experience, the only time that I found something to be working is when I was willing to take a risk, designing a creative, just throwing something onto the wall and see what sticks.
I think that's amazing. And one of the other things that you had mentioned is around benchmark data. Like, how would someone kind of go about, you know, assessing and figuring out what their benchmark data is to see how successful that they've become, like if they're running some kind of campaign?
Benchmark data is super interesting. So first of all, every company is different, every product's different. So as a business, you know your ROI, your cost, and the goals of the goals that you're trying to achieve. So at the end of the day, you're trying to make money. You're a business, you're trying to grow it. While you grow it, you want to make money. So setting up benchmark data first, if you have no campaigns whatsoever and this is your first try, just figure out, like, you know, cost per customer, cost per good. What is that? And maybe just set it up as let's say this thing costs $5 to make, and you can set up $5 to see like how many people buys it, or you can try to add a 20% profit to that, you know, and make it $6, and to see if that's your goal. And when you run these ads, and when you have, like, say, cost per acquisition, CPA, you can measure against that. Does that creative deliver that $6 or $5 of cost or revenue? And that's how you build on top of it.
Yeah. And just a super important measurement to understand success.
Exactly. And if you are a company that have been running campaigns for a long time, and you have obviously successful campaigns, how I was talking about 80-20 rule, you know what's working, and what's working becomes your baseline, and you're just optimize against that baseline, and you're going to keep optimizing against that baseline. It's actually quite fun. It's like a game, you just going to the next level. Achievement unlocked.
Sophia, you are such a marketing nerd, and I love it. And I've loved every moment of this conversation. And thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you want to share? I mean, we talked about so many things, and you just have so many ideas, and you're just flowing with awesome content.
Well, I kind of want to know more about you. So one of the things that I get really confused by, because I'm super deep in the data hole that I live in every day, but I hear these terms like product marketing, direct response, developer marketing, etc. First of all, how do companies come up with that name, and what do they do? Like, what's the goal here for those functions?
Yeah. I mean, I think that marketing is so loaded and means so many things to different companies at different stages. At a small company like a startup, your first hire is definitely like a growth marketer, someone that can kind of like growth hack and get more and more users to start using your product. And what I do is developer marketing, and I think developer marketing is just a way to say that I would probably consider myself as a marketing generalist that just happens to specialize in the audience of developers. And there's different functions and different pieces of being a developer marketer. So you could do product marketing for developer tools. You can do audience marketing. So you're actually marketing a suite of products and services that are geared towards developers. But it's more of like an outbound marketing kind of function. So that's why like developer evangelism and developer relations teams exist. And then there's also platform marketing. So you think about an entire platform that developers would need access to and to build on top of. So like Azure, Microsoft Azure would be a platform, a great example of that. When I was at Microsoft, I was working on like Windows Phone and Windows 8 a long time ago. And the idea was to do platform marketing. So getting developers to buy into the idea of the platform in that strategy, and then building on top of that. So we could probably talk about this all day, but I think, essentially I think what you're trying to drill down in is that there are, the way that you kind of look at marketing, in terms of idea and execution and data and analyze, like I think every single marketing person in almost any industry at any different size, they all kind of slice and dice their marketing team in different ways. And they all have to do all of those really, really well. And during COVID times, I believe that there is a really awesome opportunity, just like what you believe, for being creative. It's for thinking thoughtfully about what are some of these interesting marketing campaigns. What can we do around mobile marketing? What can e-commerce companies do around mobile marketing right now so that they can continue to grow their businesses? Old Navy, Gap, they're closed all their brick and mortar stores, but is there an opportunity for them now to start selling more online?
Yep.
And so I think, instead of being shy and being scared and kind of hiding behind COVID, but doing more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that's really interesting as you're talking about, how can companies reinvent themselves? And one way, like from my just experience and what I found useful is, instead of thinking with a whole, truckload of what has worked, just go directly to what do I want right now? What is this thing that we're selling? I've seen some really good campaigns out there on Instagram these days because, we're all on it.
Right.
I see a lot of department stores start selling sweatpants, candles. My friend's company, shout out Ansel and Ivy, they're doing really, really well. They sell plants. And these companies are more catered to staying at home. So I feel like a lot of companies have adjusted really, really, really well to current climate. And even with Slack, I use every day, they started selling me tools at half price or something. I can't remember, but everybody's trying to do something.
Yeah. And turning, these COVID times that we're in from a marketer's challenge to a marketer's opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Identify opportunities and don't let the fear lead your ideation. Use the opportunities to lead with that.
I love that. I think that's a great way to end this conversation. I hope we get to talk about nerd out more about marketing together for years to come.
Thank you, Nisha.
Thanks, Sophia. Bye.
Bye.